Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Discussing a Murderer. This is Jeff Jones, and with me, as always, is the panel. Let's go from the top and say hello, Kelly. How you doing? How you been? Had a good week?
Hello, everyone. I've had a very tiring week. I have a confession. I am so hooked on the Johnny Depp case, it's consuming my life. Help me get out of this. I have work all week. I'm up early in the mornings, but I'm staying up all night to watch it, getting about an hour's sleep, going to work, taking my earbuds to work, which is so bad, putting one in one ear with my hair down. I've been wearing my hair to the side so no one can see the earbud in my ear just to keep watching more. It is getting beyond a joke. Send help now.
Well, how did that happen? Oops.
Yeah, so it's getting a bit awkward for me now. I took a whole night off yesterday. I haven't watched yesterday's, but the truth is, I'm not gonna lie. After we're finished here today, guess what I'm doing? I'm not even pretending I'm not gonna be doing it.
Oh my
I
God, help
spent
us
the whole
all.
day watching it.
Well, if there was ever any question if Johnny Depp could sell a ticket, I think you just answered it. So, Big Jeff, how you been?
Oh, I'm doing great. I had a chance to watch back that last episode, and it was a doozy. If you haven't watched the last episode, you have to go back. It was a complete evisceration of Item FL, and that was good. And I also had the chance this week to spend a little time with Mark Hodnott and Millbilly. If you haven't seen that, Mark is fresh off several visits with Stephen and Kathleen Zellner. He has some interesting things to say. Go check that out.
All right, and Dr. Silkman.
Good
How have you been?
morning, everyone. Good morning, everyone. Yeah, it's great to be here, and hi to the panel. Johnny who? Amber who? I'm not addicted much. Yeah, it's
All right, well. Oh, go ahead, Doc. Go ahead.
I was just going to say it's truly been unbelievable, and it's amazing how extremely popular that court case is at the moment. You incorporate anything to do with Johnny Depp or Amber Heard in your video title, you're guaranteed 100,000 views.
Let's continue with episode 6, and we're about at the halfway point, so let's get right to it.
Something ain't right. That's all I know. They checked that property over. They didn't find nothing. That's all I know. Then they finding something. I don't know no more than that. How can I know any more than that?
I know it literally just started, but when you start it and you hear Stephen say straight away, something ain't right, it's these little moments that I think we need to capture because he's in the moment. He's living this and he can feel there is something wrong. Even he was seeing that early that something wasn't making sense. So I think we need to, when these moments happen, we need to go back and relive them with him because it just reassures us why we're all here. They were feeling it and we're still seeing it. So there is definitely something goddamn wrong.
You took the words out of my mouth, Kelly, because I almost stopped it, but I was like, I can't stop it. We just started. But exactly, it's like it goes back to these folksy sayings, as I call them, or whatever, that I like. I really gravitate towards when he says these things, and I've said it before. It's like he doesn't know how right he is sometimes. Like he doesn't know how on the nose he is. So yeah, this is another example of that.
I agree. I agree with Kelly. I just want to say, you can clearly see the imagery there of his bedroom and his trailer, that they completely trashed the place. They were definitely looking for forensic evidence, incriminating forensic evidence. And it's pretty obvious they left no stone unturned. And frustratingly for the investigators, they found nothing, especially in Stephen's trailer.
Additionally, if you back up, just a couple of frames, if we could do that, and look at the garage, what do you see right in front of the toolbox? That's the jackhammered concrete. And we talked about that a little bit on the last episode. The reason why they jackhammered the concrete was because of Brendan's coerced confession. There must have been a lot of blood. And of course, if there's so much blood, it's going to seep into the cracks of the concrete. And there's no way to clean that up, right? You're not going to be able to clean that up. So all you need to do is jackhammer out the concrete and go test the seam of the crack for blood. And there it ought to be. But guess what? Just like Dr. Silkman said, nothing found. No stone unturned, quite literally.
Yes. Very good point. Very good point. And
go ahead.
Sorry, Big Jeff. And you're 100% correct. That jackhammering would have definitely caused two things: a lot of vibration and a hell of a lot of dust. And you can clearly see that on item FL, where's the concrete dust? It's way, way too clean.
100% correct. And this whole case, especially this whole garage scene, the story of what you find is it's incredibly fishy. And what's even more fishy is what you don't find, right? Because there should be blood through the cracks. There should be blood spatter. There should be a lot of stuff that you just don't find. It's not what you find in this case. It's what you don't find. So many times that is just as important.
Let me add some more fish to your pond there, Big Jeff. And last week you talked about the creeper, right? And how supposedly in Brendan Dassey's confession, they used the creeper to get her out to the fire pit. Well, what's in the middle of the frame right now? Is anybody familiar with what that is? That bar, that metal bar in the middle?
That's to remove engines.
That's right. So you could easily use that to hoist someone out, and that would actually roll someone out. See, here's just an example of where there's better tools available, but it's just fishy, right? If you have to move something heavy, you have this piece of equipment right in front of you. Why do you use the one that doesn't work?
Some people would call that a cherry picker.
Cherry picker, there you go.
That's right, yeah.
For removing an engine from a car. You can lift 2,000 pounds or 5,000 pounds or something with it. Well more than the weight of a body.
Just a quick question. Do we know when this photo was taken? Was it in November?
I don't know. It could be after too.
Snow on the John Deere right there.
Yeah, they definitely jackhammered on March 1st, so it's after that.
Right. Okay.
But I think they probably cordoned off the garage to traffic. So I'm not sure who might have even bothered to have gone in there. Until the Making a Murderer, Laura. So we don't know. I don't know whether that was an in situ picture that was perhaps taken, by the cops or after the search, or whether it was taken by, the Making a Murderer documentary.
Yeah, it'll be really interesting to find out the chronology of when they found item FL as compared to when they jackhammered the concrete. Because that could be very, very telling indeed.
Yeah, well, they found item FL after they jackhammered the concrete. It's the Gilter story that it was the jackhammering that loosened it from the wall or whatever. I almost don't see how that's possible. If the bullet was lodged in the wall from being shot in the inside, it would have expanded, right? So it would have went in, and then it would have sort of mushroomed and would have been almost like a rivet, tough to get out. And it was always our good friend Eric Cozy who, looked at the picture of FL and it said there's no dust on this. There's no dust on this boat.
Correct.
So, yeah.
You're the captain. You get the captain's chair.
Where's the Morgan?
I say, where is the blood? And you cut a deer, until you're butchering a deer. Here's the table.
Yep.
You're gonna have on the floor and all, I cut a lot of them up.
Now, I understand. There's about 5 quarts of blood in a human body. And, there's no evidence of that, but we certainly can argue, and we are going to argue, where is the blood?
If Jerry shoots me right now, something's gonna come out of me.
Maybe yes, maybe no.
Maybe you little bullshit come out.
It's a lot of bullshit. Come on.
Even the Avery family just saw the ridiculous nature of what the state were trying to propose here, in terms of the mere fact that the state alleged that Teresa Halbach was shot, 10 or 11 times, including twice in the skull. And, even the Avery family was pretty cognizant of the fact, all right, if this type of murder event took place, right, and let's also don't forget the dismembering part, you're going to have a messy, bloody crime scene. And, I know they laughed, and I think they saw the irony of the situation, whereby what the state was claiming could not have possibly taken place, either in the trailer nor the garage. The big question is, and even Alan said, where is the blood? Where is the blood?
What strikes me about that is 20 years ago from when this shot was taken, he was probably in a different room with a different lawyer saying, we have 18 eyewitnesses to where Stephen was. How can they possibly get away with convicting him when we have 18 people that saw him at the house pouring concrete? How is it even possible that people are going to believe what's right in front of their eyes? And yet again, it happened. So to Alan Avery, to Stephen Avery, it seems to me that they're quite used to the fact that, logic and common sense is not going to prevail. And it's just sad.
No.
Maybe you little bullshit come out.
It's a lot of bullshit. Come on.
More ways than one.
I won't shoot you. Don't worry.
Very much in there for you.
Well, thank you. Thank you.
High velocity spatter, you're standing over somebody, it goes
All over, and it's tiny,
it's tiny, it's fat,
little.
it spreads, it's just gonna cover all the junk. The more cluttered it is, the harder it is going to be to clean up high velocity spatter.
Yeah, and it's real small droplets.
You will not be able to find every bit of it.
Let's talk about some specific results we haven't heard. I'm gonna put on exhibit 237 right now. See that crack? It sort of runs north-south. Law enforcement actually took a jackhammer and tore up concrete chunks, right?
That was my understanding.
And they did that because they thought, well, if the victim had been killed here, perhaps her blood would have soaked into those cracks, right?
I assume so.
Did you find Teresa Halbach's DNA on any of those swabs?
No, I did not.
If somebody had cleaned that garage floor with bleach before the police came, you would not expect to find any DNA, would you?
No, I wouldn't.
But in this case, you did find DNA. You found Mr. Avery's own DNA.
That's correct.
I think I just want to highlight a couple of points here. If you saw on the concrete pieces that were being jackhammered up, you find all these circles, right? So essentially what they did is they sprayed the surface with luminol, and then they use a light in order to detect the potential presence of blood. Now, luminol is not specific for blood, right? But it does react with blood. So essentially what they do is they spray with luminol and they put circles where the luminol lights up. Normally what they do is once they have identified an area that's positive with luminol, they then do another test. I believe it's a presumptive test for blood, right? So in this particular case, this area that they're jackhammering must have been a hot spot, right? A hot spot of where luminol was positive. So when they jackhammered up the concrete, if someone had been shot there and bled, as Big Jeff alluded to, the blood would have soaked into the concrete. You cannot prevent that. The mere fact that Culhane was not able to find the presence of any blood is very, very telling. Have a look at that area that they jackhammered out. That's a fairly significant area, a wide area, a long area, right? And the fact that they found the presence of no blood or DNA from Teresa Halbach is very telling. And the final point is this. The fact that they did find Stephen Avery's DNA, I believe it was near the back of his Suzuki, proved that they did not extensively clean that garage. And they did exactly what Brendan Dassey said. They cleaned up spill from motor vehicles in the garage. Had nothing to do with the shooting of anyone.
If the victim had been killed here, perhaps her blood would have soaked into those cracks, right?
I assume so.
Did you find Teresa Halbach's DNA on any of those swabs?
No, I did not.
If somebody had cleaned that garage floor with bleach before the police came, you would not expect to find any DNA, would you?
No, I wouldn't.
But in this case, you did find DNA. You found Mr. Avery's own DNA.
That's correct.
She was shot a number of times. There would be massive pools of blood. It wasn't there. Stephen, I don't believe, is capable of sanitizing that house. Very few evidence technicians would be capable of fully sanitizing an area like that. And they know what to hide and how to hide it. I don't think Stephen could do that.
You checked item DD, 22 caliber gun. That's a rifle, right?
Yes.
You know that if someone shoots another human being with a gun that's very close to them, there may be blowback, spatter of blood onto that weapon?
I assume that's possible.
Well, that's what you were looking for.
I was simply looking for blood stains, yes.
On the barrel?
Correct.
And you found none?
Correct.
You never found any of Teresa Halbach's DNA on any kind of mattress or bedding, did you?
I don't believe I examined any mattress or bedding.
Okay. So none of that was even sent to you, right?
Correct.
You never found any DNA of Teresa Halbach's on any carpet in his house, did you?
No.
There was a stain that was found that appeared to be a blood drop on the bathroom floor, right?
There were several items on a bathroom floor. I don't know which one you're referring to.
Well, let's put them all together. All the bathroom items, the floor, the vanity, the sink, you tested all of those.
Correct.
None of them had Teresa Halbach's blood on it, did they?
No.
You tested many knives that were sent to you, right?
Yes.
I see at least 7 just in the May 8th report, right?
Yes.
No DNA of Teresa Halbach's.
Correct.
By the way, in all of this evidence that you tested, all of it, did you ever find any DNA of a gentleman named Brendan Dassey anywhere in all of your tests?
No, I did not.
Not one shred, right?
No, I did not find his DNA.
And you had his profile?
Yes, I did.
This is completely laughable, right? It's pretty obvious that they did an extensive search of Stephen Avery's trailer, right? They literally tore the place upside down. And their contention was that, according to what Brendan said, Teresa Halbach was pinned up in that bed and they did all these unspeakable acts to her. Did you hear what Culhane said? She said that she doesn't believe they even sent the bedding for testing, right? And the only foreseeable reason why they wouldn't have sent the bed for testing is because there was no visible stains. There was no evidence of any type of bloodshed, bodily fluids, absolutely nothing, right? They tore up the carpet, right, to see if blood had soaked through the carpet. They couldn't find any presence of blood or Teresa Halbach's genomic DNA. But the incredible thing is this: of all of the only blood and DNA that they found in Stephen Avery's entire trailer had belonged to Stephen Avery himself. That goes to show that he did not extensively clean his trailer. So, you think about it. If you have committed a murder in which there has been bloodshed, you want to clean the place from top to bottom. He never ever cleaned his own blood, right? So therefore, it proves that there was no extensive cleaning of his trailer by Stephen, right? That's damning in itself.
So yeah, just as if you needed to pile onto that, one might suspect that the reason that they didn't send the bedding, as you said, was because they didn't find any visible stains on it. But now they would have to explain why they didn't. And what do they tell them? Why doesn't Jerry say something like "oopsie"? When Culhane says that they didn't send the bedding. Who do you ask the question to? Why didn't you?
Correct.
Do you guys want to hear a little mattress story that I have from hospital? I know Big Jeff's heard it before.
Go for it.
I love it.
So, as you all know, in emergency, we have our trolley, our beds, and they are protected mattresses to a sense. They are designed that you can easily wipe off when a patient comes in, they get seen, we wipe, and then we remake the bed with a sheet. So we had a severe trauma. This, bless her soul, an elderly lady got hit by a rubbish truck and she died. She came into our hospital. I was the first responder in the hospital, so I had to go in and do CPR. And while we were working on her, it was very apparent that she was DOA, which was dead on arrival. She had been severed basically from her hip down. Her legs were torn open, every bone and every muscle and every artery was basically hanging out. So the entire bed was flooded with blood. Anyway, got rid of, we put her in a bag, she went to the mortuary, and the days went on. After a day or two, there was complaints that there was this really odd smell in the bay that she was in, the resus area, and we were always looking for this odd smell. We couldn't quite get our finger on it, and it would be weird because it would come in waves, and we couldn't quite understand what was because there's a little fridge in there where we keep certain medicines, and we were wondering whether there was something sour in the fridge, but why would so we were looking everywhere. And then what ended up happening was, one day a lady came in and she was sitting on the bed, and it had just been cleaned again, been wiped down with these sanitary wipes that are wet and a little bucket of water, what we do. And this woman said, something smells weird, and we were like, yeah, it does. Anyway, she got up to go to the toilet, and when she got up to go to the toilet, at the back of her gown, her white gown, was this really odd browny red stain all over her. And we were all like, oh my god, what the fuck? We thought she was hemorrhaging. So we're like, oh my god, where are you bleeding? Quick, we need to assess you. Everyone's like, we need to assess you. What had happened was, the blood from the victim, from that elderly lady days ago, had seeped into that mattress that much that we didn't realize that every single time that the cleaners were coming to wipe it down and clean it, that the water that was going in there was not activating it, because it doesn't activate it, but it was mixing and sending off this pungent smell of dead blood. That's what we were smelling. And what had happened was, because this woman was a larger woman, when she was sitting down on the mattress and it was compressing down, while the blood was obviously in the middle of the foam or the mattress, it had drawn up as she sat down, the pressure, and it had seeped through to her. So although it wasn't clear blood, it was the residue of dead blood that had been in that mattress for a few days. So my point of this story is blood, that if that mattress, if Teresa had laid on it and had been absolutely stabbed, throat cut, anything, I'm telling you right now, that mattress that hasn't got that protective coating like the ones in the hospital do would absolutely, well and truly, be soaked with blood that you could not get rid of it. No matter how much bleach, no matter how much cleaning you did, it would stay. It would attach to the fibers inside that mattress, and there is no escaping it, no matter what. So the fact they didn't take that mattress, that to me, game over. No crime occurred in that trailer or that on that bed. It is absolutely fucking impossible.
Correct, and that's a horrific story, and it goes to show that the mattress would have represented the crime scene that occurred above the mattress, because the mattress itself is extremely absorbent. So if you secrete any bodily fluids, if you secrete any blood, because of the nature of the mattress and the fact that you're putting pressure on the mattress, it's going to absorb everything deep down into the mattress. I've seen a lot of crime documentaries in which they've actually picked up the mattress and they've turned it around, right? Literally turned it around to see the bottom of the mattress. And you can literally see bodily fluids and blood have gone straight through the mattress, right? So
Yeah.
there's no way you can hide a particular crime scene. Now, some people might say, oh, he put plastic, etc., etc. But there was no evidence of any plastic, right? And the best that they could do was that they had burnt the bedding, right? Because they were, as Kelly pointed out, they were fully aware that if you had cut somebody's throat, stabbed them, attacked them, etc., etc., you're going to have a lot of bodily fluids, especially blood, on that mattress. So the best the state could come up with was that they had burnt the mattress and the bedding. The problem was, of course, when they checked the small burn pit area, they found no evidence of any bedding or box springs or springs that occur inside a mattress, which basically destroyed their hypothesis that Stephen and Brendan got rid of the bedding by burning.
I just want to make a quick note though. The mattress that this incident happened on, it was removed immediately and disposed of. There was no way it was being able to savor it. In fact, once that happened, we realized that there was a bit of a tear in it. That is probably why the blood did get into it, because of that coating had been worn down. So that's why the blood was able to seep through. After that incident, I am not kidding, a recall went on to all the mattresses, that every bed that was free from that moment on, we had to get an inspector to come out and start reviewing all the beds, and we literally got rid of about 4 more that had the wear and tears in them, and we're like, gotta go. So I just wanted to clear that up, that mattress was removed immediately and we had to destroy it because there was no savoring it.
Fantastic. Yeah, that's incredible. And the other thing I want to point out is that the bed itself would have been a treasure trove of forensic evidence. Do you guys agree? A treasure trove.
Oh, absolutely.
100%. Yeah.
Paul was stabbed in Stephen Avery's trailer, and we heard versions of Stephen Avery's involvement in this case, attacking her in the trailer. Do you believe, I didn't hear you present evidence as to where exactly you believe certain parts of this crime were committed.
And until my closing argument, you're not going to hear a summary from me as to how I believe that this entire crime occurred. And let me also just remind you that there is another case that is pending at this time, the Brendan Dassey case, which may or may not be something that's raised in this prosecution. If it is not, some of those details you may not hear.
Is that just the nature of having a circumstantial case?
What he should have said, what was, you heard my narrative on my March 2nd press conference of how I thought the crime occurred. It doesn't match what you just heard in court. Oops. And if I had a good story to tell you, I tell you right now because it doesn't bother me, because what I tell and when. So that's what you just heard him say right there. Is I don't have any fucking idea what happened in that trail. I made up a story out of whole cloth, is what you're hearing him say.
That's 100% Big Jeff. And it basically, if you have a look at Ken Kratz's face, he was extremely worried because he knew that there was absolutely zero forensic evidence of any crime taking place inside Stephen Avery's trailer. And of course, now, if we're forward thinking, now you know why Mr. Kratz came up with two different murder scenarios with the same victim, right? A death occurring inside the trailer and a death occurring inside the garage. So he was already thinking in the back of his mind, how the hell are we going to, how the hell are we going to sell this story?
Part of the trick of prosecuting a case of that nature?
Necessarily think this is a trick, and I don't necessarily think it's circumstantial. We have lots and lots of scientific evidence in this case that points to one individual having committed a crime, and I'm confident that the verdict will speak the truth.
15 days of testimony. At least 15 or 16 of those days, we have been able to bring out the theme of our defense again and again. And that's remarkable. But it still all comes down to a key in his bedroom on the 7th search, bones outside of his bedroom when there's a perfectly good working smelter that would be a much better place to burn, blood in the RAV4, his blood in the RAV4, and a contaminated bullet in a garage.
But even there, in describing these, you're already doing some of the explaining that we've got to do. And let me put it this way. If ever someone's bones are found 20 feet out my bedroom window in my backyard, I'm going to be a worried guy.
Yeah, I would be too.
There were no entire bones that were found, but at least a fragment or more of almost every bone below the neck was recovered in that burn pit.
I just want to say, as a mother, as a woman, as a human being, I know they have to, put the bones somewhere, but the bones, in my opinion, just in that box is just so, I don't know how to say it, it's so disrespectful. I guess for me, being the fact that I work in emergency and when someone is deceased, we treat the body with respect regardless, and we put them in body bags and we gently place their bodies into the mortuary, and we always have respect. When I look at that box, I just think to myself that surely there was another way, another method, or another container that had a little bit more dignity to put the bones in respectfully, just not thrown in literally a cardboard box and here, have a go at these. I know that you'd have to be careful and you got to treat them in a sense of making sure there's no contamination, but seriously, it's a human being, for God's sake. Why would you treat the bones any different than you would treat an intact body that needs to go to the coroner for an autopsy? I just find it distasteful. I really do.
100% correct. I think honestly what they were going with was shock and awe. Make it as brutal as you possibly can. Here's your daughter discarded essentially in a box, right? And I think I do agree with Kelly. It should have been done much more sensitive than that. But The other thing which we see here, which is incredibly deceptive, was if you see the picture, it says evidence tag 8318, and it shows you an intact skeleton, right? And so this would have given the impression to the jury and the judge that the entire skeleton was found, right? Anything but, right? If she actually had placed a proper diagram of what actually was found in that box, you will see that it will be a tiny, tiny proportion of an entire skeleton. And what is even more alarming was around about 60% of the skeletal remains have been unaccounted for. No one knows where they are. Yes, some of the bones will be converted to ash, but you're not going to lose 60% of the skeletal remains. So I think that diagram was actually quite false. It was used to give the impression that the entire skeletal remains of Teresa Halbach was in Stephen Avery's burn pit. That clearly was not the case.
I'm glad you brought that up. And Dr. Silkman, I just want to clarify this because a lot of people have always questioned this. What we do see here, those bone markers of what part of the body it was, that is showing, though, that the bones, in her opinion, are from this part of the body. Am I correct?
Correct. Except
So,
she didn't know, sorry, Kelly, she didn't know in regards to the long bones. She didn't know whether they come from the arms or the legs.
okay, because the other thing that I think has always confused a lot of, well, not a lot of us, I should not speak on behalf of everyone else. The thing that has always sparked my curiosity and my observation is when you look at that, and I completely agree with you, there's 60% of her missing. But what I see, because I like to look at everything, is there is it's just feels so selective. Like every part, there's a part of every part of the human bone, like skeletal remains. So you have a piece of the head, you have a piece of the arm, you have a rib, you have a part of the legs. So you're having like the body structure there, and the reason why I want to point that out is because a lot of people, again, correct me, I shouldn't say that, it has been discussed that see what Johnny Depp has done to me.
A lot of people on the panel.
What's happening now? I'm learning to correct myself because I'm scared of objection.
Hearsay.
So the thing is, there was a lot of discussion back in the day that they might have found Teresa's torso removed and taken and burnt elsewhere, whatever. But here it's showing that the torso must have been a part of this section because we have a rib. So the rib, and a rib is a part of this batch. So we've got a skeletal remain somewhere intact or part of something, or it was all at least burnt together for a piece of everything to come out.
Yeah, if I may. So I'd like to pull a Kelly. Kelly's the one who likes to follow the narrative from the beginning to the end. What is the circumstances by which a bone from every piece of the body could have possibly ended up in Stephen's burn pit? We know for a fact that there is no way you could cremate a whole body on an open fire. It just is not going. He didn't have enough fuel. He didn't have enough time to do all that. So of course, what the guilters, who are very interested in making up their own stories, they say, okay, well, what he did was dismembered her. We have the cuts, and he burned pieces of her in various burned barrels. Well, so I mean, let's get a little gruesome. I apologize for doing this, but you have a saw or whatever you have. You maybe cut off an appendage, burn that in the burn barrel. You cut off a knee, from the knee down, you burn that in another burn barrel. How does a piece from every body end up back in the burn pit? That would mean that he would have to go take the cremains from the burn barrel, maybe the Yonda burn barrel, because that's the one that Josh Redant says he saw the big fire in. And what did he do? Take that and dump it back into his own burn barrel after dismembering the leg? It just does not make any sense at all. There's too good of a mixture of bones for them to happen the way that the Gilter's narrative explains.
Right,
Sorry,
I
Jeff.
agree. It's like it's just a perfect representation. When you look at the size of the pieces that you actually get, it's like, wow. If you were gonna like, hey, let's take one piece from every part of the body and then put it in it's almost too good. And the way you describe it, Big Jeff, I just agree. It's like, how could you maybe it would be more likely that you only found bones from the top half of the body, or you only found bones from the bottom half of the body, or one of those examples. But it is just a spot on representation. Yeah.
Thank you, Big Jeff. That's where actually I was going with it. That's what I was trying to get out. No, but you did it for me. That's what I was trying to get out. It was, we have a piece of every part of the body. How? That's what I was saying. Like we talk about Cuss Road and maybe finding a torso in place. Well, that kind of doesn't work now because we've got part of the torso in there now. So something, it was like, how was it? And Kath, it drives Kath mad because she's like, did someone deliberately go in and go, all right, I'll take a piece of their skull, I'll take a bit of the torso. Like they've gone down and literally handpicked what they need to show a full skeleton.
The big issue, and this really is a huge issue, and that is there is a lack of anatomical continuity, right? This is the big problem. So we've alluded to the fact that you've got a bit of this and a bit of that, but you don't find entire structures, right? You don't find an intact rib cage. You do not find an intact vertebra. You do not find an intact skull. In fact, you don't even find an intact pelvis. These are bones which are relatively resistant to burning. So what you do, what you find is a scrambled mess, right? You've got a little bit of this and a little bit of that, but you lack anatomical continuity, which means that if Teresa Halbach was burnt in situ in that burn pit, you're going to see entire structures like the vertebral column, right? The vertebra, the rib cage, long bones. What you don't find are any of those structures. You find a random mix of cremains, which possibly means that if she had been burnt elsewhere, for a start, we know that there's been some type of dismemberment event because there are saw cuts in the bones. So it is quite possible that she could have been burnt either in a burn barrel or burn barrels, and parts of the cremains were simply scooped up, right? Scooped up in a bucket and either brought over or dumped in Stephen Avery's burn pit. That will explain the fact that you have no anatomical continuity. And what I mean by that is you don't find an entire arm, you don't find an entire leg, you don't find rib cage, pelvis, and also the vertebra, which are very, very hard to burn. All the teeth are gone, right? 35% of the skull was recovered. Where's the rest of the skull? So it looks like you've got a mishmash of bone fragments, small bone fragments. And what Big Jeff alluded to is perfect. Stephen Avery did not have the fuel, nor did he have the time, because one of the biggest problems, which Dahan pointed out, was that an open burn pit loses all the heat to the atmosphere. Whereas if you burn a human being in a closed vessel, like a crematorium or a burn barrel, the heat is reflected back, which means that the heat is intense enough to convert a human being to bone fragments, right? And he's worked with cadavers being burnt in burn barrels, and he demonstrated that you can convert a human being to bone fragments. But there's something weird here, guys. Around 60% of the skeletal remains are missing, right? So that means that either they haven't been found or part of her body has been buried somewhere. I can't account for it.
And it's exactly correct, Tony, what you say. I mean, Kathleen Zellner's main point is that she feels that the primary burn site was off of the Avery property, perhaps in the in the quarry. And her point is, who would be stupid? Why would Stephen Avery be stupid enough to find bones and find a burn site and dump it back into his own burn pit? And this is really the same exact argument that you're making. Why in the world, if he had to burn something in the burn barrel, how does it end up back in the burn pit? It doesn't make any sense for him to have taken something out of the burn pit, out of the burn barrel, and brought it back to his burn pit to be there and create this perfect mixture. It just doesn't make it, to me, it doesn't make any sense.
100% correct. And it's amazing how Strang said, if I had bones 20 feet out of my back door, I would be worried too. And that's that's why when you look at the cremains and where the cremains have been found, it drops a really big clue that something really fishy is going on. Because remember, not all the cremains were found in the burn pit. Jost discovered cremains outside the burn pit area on the grass, right? And they did find burnt human remains in Yonder burn barrel number 2. And in Dr. Eisenberg's report, she also talked about cut, burnt human cremains found at the Manitowoc County gravel pit. Guys, I don't know about you, but if you're going to burn a victim, the last thing you're going to do is spread the cremains over many different areas. If you're going to move the victim, if you don't want searchers pointing to you, you would definitely remove all traces of that victim elsewhere, off the property. You're not going to leave some here, some there, and some a great distance away at the Manitowoc County gravel pit. If you're going to do it, you move everything. What do you think, guys?
Well, I 100% agree. And as we seek to think of how those bones got there, was it the killer? Was it law enforcement? To me, that's almost something that law enforcement would do, because the fact that the lawyers are saying, and there's another YouTuber who weighed in on this case who's ended up being a guilter, said, "Oh yeah, for me it's the bones that are 20 feet from his house." That's a cop thing. It really does speak to me that that they're calls, right, that we listen to, the dispatch, and they're picking up bones miles away from the site. Oh yeah, we need more buckets to put the bones in. And all of a sudden, bones look as if they may have been spread out. How make they get spread out like that? Well, if somebody dumped them out of a bucket and they spilled over. So it does speak to me that the pattern of bones and the fact that they're there just speaks to me reminiscent of a law enforcement planning, just because that would seem to a law enforcement person and convey to a jury that that's going to make them seem more guilty.
100% correct. But to me, the big telltale sign is the fact of a lack of anatomical continuity, and that's what Dehan commented as well. Hey, we don't find a rib cage, an entire rib cage. We don't find an intact pelvis. And in actual fact, the pelvis is the telling factor here, guys. Because remember, Dr. Bennett was able to look at the ilium bone, which is part of the human pelvis, and he came up with the diagnosis that the ilium bone had belonged to an adult human female. Why is this disturbing? Well, in the Manitowoc County gravel pit, there are also pelvic bone fragments in, I think it was an evidence tag 8675. These are the cremains that actually showed anatomical continuity, right? There were two bones joined together, and there were cut marks in the pelvic bone fragment. So here's the problem. Dr. Eisenberg refused to classify them as human. And if she did classify them as human, we've got a problem. What the hell is part of Teresa Horbach's pelvis doing in the burn pit and also in the Manitowoc County gravel pit, right? It absolutely made no sense. And my final point is this. Dr. Eisenberg looked at all the cremains, all of them. She came to the conclusion that all the cremains are from one victim, one. So now you can see how crazy this is, whereby you've got human cut burnt cremains in 3 different geolocations. I agree with Big Jeff. It makes no sense.
There's just the one point that I want to maybe clarify, and that is the bone. There's evidence that the bones were actually crushed. I think we talked about this in prior episodes. That after, this would more resemble bones that were burned and crushed. And I think if that was true, that they were in fact crushed, it adds another dynamic because it adds more time. It's more involved. And so that adds evidence. And can we say that for sure, that we think that the bones were crushed?
Yes. Dr. Eisenberg actually said that. She said that there was human intervention. So in other words, the bones appear to have been crunched. So not only were they cremated, and not only was the victim cut up to pieces, but after cremation, the bones were crunched. That all the bone fragments were very, very small. There were no intact bones. No one ever found one entire rib. No one found one entire arm or leg bone. Everything was crunched.
So what, I mean, is that feasible for a person to do with a shovel? Or are we talking you need the tools? You need the tools of like a crematorium, or perhaps some of the gravel sifting equipment like they have at McDonald's?
No doubt, because if you had taken these bones and you crunch them and you mix them with small rocks, you never find them. That's the end of the party. You would never find them. And of course, in the quarry, I believe that they did have a rock crusher over there.
Identified as being collected from a site other than the burn pit behind the defendant's garage.
Human bone also was collected from what was designated burn barrel number 2.
Now, you did offer an opinion that you believe the location for the primary burning episode was the burn pit behind the defendant's garage. Is that correct?
That is correct.
There was a third site, was there not?
Yes.
And this would be the quarry pile.
Yes, sir.
You found in the material from the quarry pile 2 fragments that appeared to you to be pelvic bone.
That's correct.
You suspected them of being human pelvic bone.
That's correct.
The charring and calcined condition that you saw was essentially consistent with the charring and the calcined condition in the Yonda burn barrel and behind Stephen Avery's garage.
That is correct, sir.
Nowhere did you find evidence that you were looking at bone fragments from more than one body.
That is correct, sir.
So what you conclude is that by human agency, bone fragments here were moved.
Some bone fragments identified as human had been moved. That's correct.
All right. The vast majority of the human bone fragments was found behind Stephen Avery's garage.
That's correct.
Why were they inconsistent with human bone fragments that could have been moved to that site after burning?
I would expect to see some breakage to some fragments with that transport, and I did not see anything like that.
Well, we do know that the very recovery of burnt bone fragments from behind Mr. Avery's garage involved shoveling, correct?
That's correct.
Transport to a sifting screen.
Yes, sir.
Sifting on the screen,
That's correct.
So you're not able to say that the bone fragments you found are inconsistent with having been transported to the burn area and poured out there.
Based on the volume of human bone fragments behind the garage, I find it highly unlikely that was not the primary burn location.
All right. But I guess that rests on an opinion that transport in a barrel or some other container and being poured out would have done more damage to those human bone fragments than shoveling, sifting, putting into a box, and transporting to Madison would have done?
I really don't know.
You don't know one way or the other.
That's correct.
The important thing here is that Dr. Eisenberg just debunked her own theory. Right? She just debunked her own theory because
Yes, she did.
Because Strang beautifully put, oh, wait a minute, you never examined the cremains in situ, right? You actually had to get them dug out, sifted, and then transported. And you found no evidence of damage caused by transportation. So therefore, she actually debunked her own self, which meant that if those bones were in a burn barrel, they could have been dumped into the burn pit, right? And you would have seen the same degree of damage as what would have occurred to those cremains due to the sifting, digging, and transportation. So embarrassingly, she debunked her own theory.
We also know that Dee made a little bit of a mistake right there when he said that the cremains were excavated with shovels, didn't he? Because we know that they actually had a skidster and they dug up the ground with giant power tools that people rode on. That's how they dug it up. And so you're telling me, well, there wasn't enough damage. They dug up these bones with a ride-on power tool that's meant for moving loads of earth. And they're telling us about bone damage breakage. Please give me a break.
Correct. Well, initially, it was a two-step process. Initially, they did use shovels to remove the ash that was in the burn pit. And I believe 2 days later, as Big Jeff alluded to, they came in with bobcats. Right? In Australia, we call them bobcats. And they dug up the entire burn pit area. So in effect, guys, what they did is that they destroyed the burn pit, the whole lot. It got flattened, right? So the last thing you want to do is go through cremains, having run over the area in heavy machinery, as Big Jeff alluded to. The other important point is that what you don't see anywhere near that burn pit is a coroner and a forensic anthropologist. And how embarrassing that Dr. Eisenberg admitted never having stepped foot on the Avery salvage yard or at Cuss Road or at the Manitowoc County gravel pit to examine any cremains in situ.
Another possible burn site. Can you?
Based on the information I have at hand, I cannot.
That's all I have.
Mr. Ertl, showing you exhibit number 160. Can you identify that, please?
It's an email to and from Tom Fassbender and myself.
All right. And in this email, you state, in regards to the burn pit, our involvement began with a request to use our sifting equipment. The scene had obviously been altered at that point. Is that right?
Correct.
And then would you go on and read the next sentence, please?
Had we been working any of these scenes from start to finish, there would likely have been more thorough photo record done by us. However, under the circumstances, we were merely able to provide technical assistance rather than complete scene processing.
Okay. More typically, if you're called to the scene to process potential evidence, you're able to do so from start to finish, right?
I'd say in the majority of cases, when we arrive at the scene, we are given over control and we take the lead.
To your knowledge, did Mr. Fassbender call a forensic anthropologist out to the scene of the burn pit?
Not to my knowledge.
Okay. And this area, the whole area that was excavated was about how big?
Probably roughly the size of this table I'm sitting at.
And when you would bring over a shovel here or shovel there, nobody kept track of where exactly in that area any particular suspected bone may have been, right?
No, everything that was collected in this area was placed together in a box.
This area being that 4 by 5 feet.
4 by 5 foot ash pile was placed together in a box.
There was no systematic approach to the collection of the evidence at first processing. From what I saw, I know there was no grid imposed at that time during the initial excavation. I was informed that shovels were used in order to do that, and it wasn't, shall we say, a more forensic archaeological approach.
Okay, so other than nitpicking, why does this matter? Why does it matter?
Well, it matters as far as being able to tell things about the circumstances surrounding the burn of the body, where the body was burned. Was it moved? Is this the actual location or not?
And based on the recovery method that was used here, are you able to offer an opinion about where these human remains were burned?
No, I'm not.
Can you agree with Dr. Eisenberg's opinion that probably the area behind Mr. Avery's garage was the original burn site?
No.
Why not?
I've been involved in cases where human remains have been burned in one location and moved to another location. And in those cases, in fact, the actual location where the bones have been moved to tends to be the location where most of the remains are.
The dispute is not whether the bones were moved after they were burned. They were. I don't think any reasonable person would disagree with that. But, the key issue is the state says they were burned behind Stephen's place, and then a few of them were moved from there. We say they most likely were burned somewhere else. There were better burn sites to cremate a body to that condition. And then somebody who knew the cops would be very interested in pinning this on Stephen dumped most of the bones, probably thought he was dumping all of the bones in a pile in Stephen's burn area, and then sort of sprinkled them around in the grass so there'd be no missing them.
Did he just say, hang on a minute, he just said somebody who thought the police would be looking at Stephen put the bones there. Is he alluding to the killer himself here, or did you guys pick up on that? Was he? I always assumed that Dean and Strang considered that it was law enforcement that did the bones versus the killer. But that statement he just said kind of goes with what Kathleen has been saying, that it was somebody else that put them there knowing that it would look good for law enforcement to find them there to pin Stephen Avery.
Sure, what it sounded like to me, Kel.
Yeah, I think all officers of the court, are, say the police did it at their own peril. You know what I'm saying? Much more politic of him to say it was the killer that did it as opposed to the cops.
And then put the burn barrel back in its place, not knowing that a few of the bones remained in the muck and ash beyond the burn barrel.
I try to wrap my brain and think who's doing this to me. I can't figure it out. I still come up to dead end. Just like the last case, I couldn't figure out.
I'm not in there. Time you got it.
5 after.
5 after already? Good thing it ain't an emergency.
Yeah.
Hey, that card on your diabetes.
I don't care. You can go in now. Okay.
This is the rear cargo area of the Toyota RAV4. In this area, there are numerous stains, and they all are basically described as contact transfer stains.
Describe these stains that you observed in this portion of the vehicle.
This stain right here, this is just a classic example of bloody hair transferring onto an unstained surface. It has enough blood there that it also shows a bit of a flow pattern off of the bottom of that. But you can see that it is thicker here, and as the length draws out, it comes to a point. This is indicative of bloody hair transferring the blood from that head here onto this surface.
Okay, so there's a point that really isn't. I think everybody kind of accepts this. Is that right? That looks like bloody hair to us.
I would agree. I think this is probably the only authentic truth that I've heard in this case. I do believe that as well. And even Kathleen, in even her reenactments, regardless who she said put her there to create it, she even goes with it. Yeah, it's from her hair. She was placed in the back at one point from either a blow at the back of the head, gunshots at the back of the head. Regardless, that stain came from bloody hair.
Yep, I just want to add the comment. 100% agree, and that's probably the only thing that he got right. That Storky got correct. And that's important because it establishes the fact that Teresa Horbach, the victim, was placed in the back of her own RAV4. That's important. And so there's contact or transfer stain from blood likely pouring from the top of her head onto the plastic board that we see in the back of the RAV. It also begs the question, how come the entire back of the RAV is not covered in blood?
To me, obviously 100% agree with what the panel's already said. To me, the question is, under the scenario that's painted by the state as to how Stephen and Brendan, murdered her, why did they have to put her in the RAV?
No reason whatsoever.
Well,
go ahead.
Brendan did say he put her in the RAV because they were going to take her elsewhere, but they realized isn't that was what he said? We put her in the RAV because we were going to drive her down and dispose of her elsewhere, and then Stephen said, no, let's just take her back out and do it in the pit.
Yeah, and coerced into saying that. But the point is, just think about that narrative. So you're you take out, you put her on the creeper, you wheel her over to the RAV. It's not easy to deadlift 100 pounds, 120 pounds. It's not easy to deadlift with no help. and you throw her in the back of the RAV, and then at what point? So you have all this time as you're wheeling there, getting over there. Just at what point? How long is she in there before they make this decision? Well, maybe it's okay. We'll burn her. It just can you just the point a reasonable narrative as to how this makes any sense on the planet, that they have all this time as they're getting her over there, and then she's in there for how long before they decide to pull her out and burn her in the pit? It makes zero sense at all. It just doesn't even have any single ring of truth to it, period.
Correct. And it begs the question, what the hell are they doing building up a fire for if their intentions was to drive Teresa Halbach somewhere else and dispose of her body? I thought the whole purpose of the fire was that they were going to cremate her, right? And remember, during Brendan's interrogation, he had initially said that they had shot Teresa Halbach inside her own RAV4, until we get corrected him and said, no, that can't be the case. And so hence Brendan had to change his story. However, the presence of Teresa Halbach's blood in the back of her own RAV4 is very, very important, as we'll get to find out, because I believe it completely destroys the narrative of the state.
Indicative of bloody hair transferring the blood from that head here onto this surface.
The blood in the raft.
Whenever I see this picture, I always feel like I'm never seeing all the blood. It's like, like when they have the mark out of someone laying on the ground, but the body's gone. Right? Like that's what it looks like whenever I see this. I feel like there was a mat or something here.
Yeah, there's so many factors with that, and I agree. Was she wrapped? Had she? My biggest thing was it could be a tarp. There was probably a mat there. The thing for me though is, I think the blood flow for me means more that she was deceased. That's my opinion. I think that there's a highly likely that she was deceased, because I think that if you were alive and you were actively bleeding and your heart was still pumping, even if you were wrapped in something to a degree at this stage, your blood would still actively be weeping and of course, depending on how big the blow was or whatever that caused that injury. But this seems like it was a controlled stain to the point that it was a contact stain, that it wasn't actively flowing. Because if it was, you would expect it to have kept flowing to the point that even if you remove the mat, it would have still got down and would have started to flow down into that crease area, which would have, because you can lift up that one as well if you tear it back. And I reckon that the blood would have kept on going down because it was actively flowing. That's why it's always been my opinion is that the point of the RAV and her being in the back was to move her after her being deceased, to then dispose of her. That's what I always believe. And I've always thought that, because if she was alive and you were semi-unconscious or you were coming to or whatever, your instinct, if you started to come to, would be to get up. And I think you would see that that happen. You would see that there would have been a moment where if she was only a little bit, a bit daisy, you'd see a head movement more, where you'd kind of go, oh. In my opinion, she was deceased when she was put in the back. That's why it's a stain versus more of a flow.
Geez, I wonder how long her hair had to be able to make a mark like that. I think, she.
Well, for all we know, she could have been wrapped up literally from head to toe, and the tips of the hair was hanging out because it was just pushed out. And
Yeah, how much?
How much? Well, we don't know, because we don't really know the position. I know that when I did a reenactment of this, I got into my own car and I did it. One thing that I did, I will say, again, this is an experiment that I don't have all the, the factors of the same structure of the same car, but it is similar, but not it's not a RAV4. But the one thing that I did was I put all white paper around the back, and I put I got in, and I remember I was online with Tony here, and we were online, and I was showing him, and he was laughing, but he couldn't really see because my head was just, he just couldn't see my forehead. I'm like, yeah, this isn't working. So what I ended up doing was I grabbed the famous doll, my daughter's doll that I was using for experiments, and I bloodied the shit out of the hair and I threw it in. But one thing that I noticed was, because I wanted to capture the stains, what it would look like, and it was so similar, it was insane. But all I want to say is, my point was, the seats would have had to have been, in my opinion, down before she got put into it, because you would have found, in my opinion, a contact stain possibly when she would have rested against it at one stage going in, and we don't see that. So I'm in my opinion, from my experiment, the seats would have had to been down. So if the seats weren't down from Teresa, in my opinion, when someone was putting her in, they put that down first and then put her through. And that's why I always considered that's why someone put the blood stain at the back, because they knew that they had put the seats down, so they wanted it to look like Stephen had. They were trying to draw that connection.
Yeah. Well, my point is that Brendan said they cut her hair. So if you're gonna have this hair making a mark, then you have to have hair in your head to do it. So if they cut her hair off, then it would have been very difficult for her hair to make that mark.
Right, but if we're going by, if you're looking at the cranial bone fragments, she would have been shot. If you look at the cranial bone fragments, she would have been shot at the back of her head, right, and near her left temple, right? So if we're going through with the state's theory that Teresa Halbach was shot in Stephen Avery's garage, the question must be asked, from those two shooting locations, would there have been enough blood, or would there have been a lot more blood by placing Teresa Halbach in the back of her own RAV4? Is that the blood distribution pattern we see there? Is that someone being shot in the head, or is it someone being bludgeoned in the head?
See, this is the problem though, Tony. I don't think you could define which one it would be, because even if she was alive, okay, and she had just been bludgeoned, and that was from just being bludgeoned, we don't know the time frame for her to have been lying down or in a position where they've, like, it'd be different if she was bludgeoned or shot and then thrown straight in. But if she had been shot and she'd been laying somewhere for a while, her heart has now stopped. Someone's pacing around going, okay, what am I going to do? Preparing things, getting tarps, getting stuff ready. And let's say half an hour to an hour is gone. She's already done the majority of her bleeding out elsewhere. All we can confidently say with that one is it wasn't on the Avery salvage yard. So wherever she was killed, or wherever this bludgeon happened, whether it was shot or whether it was an actual hit, it didn't happen on the Avery salvage yard, because there is no blood. Because where's the blood on the ground of where she laid, period, regardless where it come from? So my point is, she could have been laying somewhere, wounded or dead, enough for, by the time she got put into that RAV, the blood had stopped flowing. Even if she was alive, her head would have her wound would have started hematomaing to the point that it would have started to clot, it would have started to coagulate, and it would have stopped the flow to a degree. So by the time she got put in the RAV, even if she was still alive, maybe it wouldn't have been still flowing to the point that it was out of control. So that's what this is where I think it's really messy for us, and I don't think we'll ever work this one out, because she could have literally been laying dead for 2 hours somewhere before she was put in there, and all we're seeing is just the residue of the wetness from the hair, because it was still a bit damp, because she'd been laying in a pool of her blood for 2 hours. That's it. We'll never know, because we don't know what happened or where she was prior. All we know
and blood,
is it
we know
wasn't
that
the salvage yard.
gunshots, right, and head wounds. Sorry, Kelly. Head wounds and gunshots to the head offer up a large amount of blood immediately. It's not like you get shot, and it's rare that you would get shot and not
It's
bleed.
not even it's not even just the blood, it's brain matter as well. There's other things that would ooze out of the brain, out of the skull. It's not just blood. That's why I'm and because we don't see any matter of besides the stain of blood. I feel like I'm repeating myself with the blood. Word blood's doing my own head in, but that's why I think she has been injured. She's laid somewhere for a while. They've prepped, and then they've put her in. Whether she was dead or alive, a time had passed before she was put in. I don't believe she was put in immediately. Otherwise, there is no way that we would be just left with this poxy ass stain. It doesn't show us the story. The story it shows me is she's either the wound had already coagulated if she was alive, so she started to the flow of the blood had already started to slow down even if she was alive, or two, she'd been dead for a bit and all we're seeing is the residue. And that explains why people think that she was buried in cuss for a while. She could have been laying in cuss for a while, and and it was raining and it was damp, and then that's why the hair maintained that wetness. So when it got put in, when she got finally put into the RAV to then get driven to the place that she was going to be dismembered and burnt, that's all we're seeing. That's why it's so minimal.
Right. So if you bring up a really good point. The fact there is no one actually mentioned any presence of brain material, brain matter, or bone fragments, right? If one considers high velocity bullet impact, potentially you could get some deposition of bone fragments, definitely brain matter, and other material oozing out of the skull. You don't find any of that. No one has ever reported anything like that. So, Kelly, I tend to agree that potentially Teresa Horbach could have been temporarily laying somewhere until they decided to move her body. And Cuss Road was potentially a perfect spot because it's a highly wooded area. And of course, we've got now that report about the presence of a clandestine burial site at Cuss Road, right? And we also have a report in which it is mentioned about the fact that bones were found at the clandestine burial site. So it all seems to make sense, but the main focus is away from the Avery salvage yard, right? Because I agree, had she been shot, there would have been a great pool of blood, potential blood. Had she been bludgeoned on the Avery salvage site, there would have been a lot of bloodshed. The cadaver dogs and the scent dogs would have definitely picked that up. You don't find that type of activity, right? No one has ever reported great pools of blood anywhere on the Avery salvage site. The only mention of the blood per se is in Teresa Horbach's own RAV4. I think that's a very interesting point.
So Cal, if I could ask a question, is for the amount of time that you're saying, is there an amount of time that would preclude the stain on the back of the RAV from being cast off from her being thrown in there with blood coagulation?
Oh,
did I ask that question clearly?
Yeah, I don't know if it was probably clear. I just don't know if I can give a clear answer. So are we talking about the blood stain itself, or the one that we see at the back of the door?
The back, on the back door, right? So if you're the state and you're going to blame that stain on the back of the door as being cast off from the body as they threw it, into the back, is there an amount of time that we can say that she couldn't have been stewing on the ground for so long because the blood would have coagulated and wouldn't be
Now that
sort
is
of in
a
the.
good question. Okay, so I get it. So actually, no, this one. Okay, so the one thing, coagulation starts, and Tony, you got my back on this one. It starts immediately, right? But what I found with all my experiments and stuff, and what I see at work, it's the quantity of it. The more that there is, the longer it takes. So I think, in fairness, I think we could get a few hours out of her blood being still wet in the hair and there still being a cast off, because if she's in a puddle of blood, because we're talking about excessive amount of blood loss because we've got 2 gunshot wounds, I think that you'd have certain parts of the blood puddle that would have already started to coagulate, and it kind of goes in and out. But I think a lot of it would have still maintained a liquid form because there would have been a lot of it. And this is the thing that I have problems with the blood we have in the RAV. They are such small amounts, and that's the smaller, the quicker it turns, because it's not being fueled by like more liquid that's just pending to turn over. So I think that you could have got a few hours out of her laying somewhere in a pile, being able to pick her up. Although I don't excessively agree that the blood on the door is from being slung in, but in their fairness, there could be hours potentially to be able to do that and still maintain that, if that's their narrative. Because the more blood,
Thank you.
takes longer. It really does. We clean up blood puddles all the time, and I look. You guys all know me now. Every time I see blood, I'm like fucking a fly to shit. I'm just sits there and I look at it and I'm like, oi, oi, and I'm like, oh, sorry, I'm in the middle of work and I'm just looking at this blood puddle, watching it like a freak, because I'm just so engrossed in just wanting to see it turn on me, because you can sometimes see it turn, like you watch it crystallize and turn real, like not hard, but it goes gel like, and you can see it forming. And we've had puddles that we get, of course we're in a hospital, so we clean up relatively very quickly because the turnover of needing that space is almost immediately. But there is times where we have someone's taken drawn blood and we've got the little we call it the kidney cup, and blood has spilt, and there's quite a bit of blood because of the cap's fallen off, whatever, and it's sitting there, and you can see it sitting there wobbling for like 40 odd minutes, but it's because it's more quantity than a drop. So yeah. Silkman, thoughts?
Well, this is really important because I think we're at a very important crossroads here, because I think from what we've been discussing, what the state have said is that the blood on the back of the cargo door, right? The droplets of blood, the spray of blood on the back of the cargo door, and the blood that we see now on the plastic molding in the cargo bay are connected. They are connected events, i.e. the state attest that they picked up Teresa Horbach, who was bleeding after she had been shot at least twice in the skull, and in a total of 10 times. Stephen and Brendan picked her up and flung her into the vehicle. As a result of flinging Teresa Horbach in the back of her own RAV4, there was blood spray on the back of the door, and because she was bleeding either on the top of her head, likely the top of her head, some of the blood got deposited on that on the board. However, what you've come up with is a very interesting scenario, in that the two events may not be linked in time immediately following one another. And the blood spatter expert of Kathleen Zellner has shown that the spray of blood on the rear cargo door is not as a result of flinging a body or with bloody hair into the back of the vehicle. The droplets have hit the back door at 90 degrees, which means that it's not a flinging action. The blood would have been showing, there would have been a little tail on the blood droplets in the direction that the body was flung, correct? These droplets of blood go straight onto the door. And Kathleen Zellner was able to reproduce that by a bludgeoning event of the victim being very close to the ground, being struck to the ground. This now is very interesting because what Kelly has presented could possibly mean that you've got the blood on the back of the cargo door as an immediate effect of being hit. Secondly, they could have prepared or prepped her body, and she could have been laying on the ground or elsewhere for a long period of time until they decided to put it in the back of her RAV. That will explain the lack of blood in the back of the RAV, because she's dead and likely wrapped up in a tarp or the rug that was in the back of the RAV4. So those two events do not follow consecutively. The state, however, are saying that the blood on the back door is due to flinging Teresa Halbach from outside to inside the cargo bay area. That clearly cannot be the case, right? So that's very important that those two blood pools, the droplets of blood on the back of the RAV4 door and the blood you see on that panel in the back of the cargo area, they may not be related consecutively in time.
A brilliant point, Dr. Silkman. I can't go 5 minutes without insulting our friend Ken Kratz, though. Just again, as an example of what a lying sack of shit that he is, let's recall that in his March press conference, he talked about finding pools of blood in the RAV. Does that stain that over there? Do you think that qualifies in your mind as a pool of blood?
Absolutely not. I would classify that as a contact stain, in my opinion, because her hair that was wet from blood made contact to it. She didn't pull out there. No.
So there were no pools of blood in the RAV. And
No.
so that was a big fat lie. So not only is he revealing details that shouldn't be revealed, he's lying about them. There's no
Correct.
pool of blood in the RAV. It's just further demonstration of how unconscionable that event was. To take nothing away from the previous conversation, but when you're showing this picture, where are the friggin' pools, Ken? Please.
Correct. That's a very good point. And we know we've all seen crime scene photographs when someone is severely beaten around the head or shot in the skull. There's a huge amount of blood. So it's quite clear. And I think Kelly's really put up a really good point here. The thing for me that is of great concern is the lack of blood. The lack of blood. And Big Jeff alluded to it as well. Ken Kratz gave the impression that there were gallons of blood absolutely everywhere. There's not. And I calculated that the amount of blood belonging to Stephen Avery, those 6 droplets of blood, potentially were less than half a milliliter of blood that belonged to Stephen Avery, right? Now, allegedly, he had only a small cut to his finger. Well, Teresa Halbach was shot allegedly 10 times, including twice in the skull. One would expect a hell of a lot more blood, 1 in the garage and 2 in her own vehicle. Guys, we don't see that. This is the big mystery and the big problem. And because Stephen's defense team didn't have a blood spatter expert, he couldn't counteract what Storkey had said during the trial. And that is the blood on the back of the RAV4 door and the blood on that panel there is due to the fact that Teresa Halbach was flung into her own RAV4. That clearly cannot be the case. And now it begs the question, are those two events connected in time? That now opens up a whole lot of very interesting discussions, because one of our researchers on foul play got a document that stated that they found a metal instrument in the back of the RAV4 with blood on it, right? That was in a warrant. Well, guys, you've never seen any photographs of any metal object in the back of that cargo bay with blood on it. So the question is, where is it?
Why isn't it in the Castle report? Why isn't it on the evidence list?
Yeah,
oh, sorry.
That's correct. Or any photographs of it. So I can't believe that Mark Wiegert had made an error, right? He clearly would have had an inventory of what was found. And they did mention of I think it was a metallic object with blood on it in the back of the RAV. We don't find any evidence of that yet. That's exactly what you would need to get the blood spray on the back of the cargo door, being bludgeoned with a metallic object. So now it all starts to make sense that it's very likely that Teresa Horbach was actually physically attacked behind her own RAV4 with the back door open. That brings up really interesting scenarios.
Just stop. Sorry. I've just gone fully distracted here. Are you all aware that Mystic Jinx has finally been given Bobby Dassey's interview that's been sealed the entire time, the 9th of the 11th? I've just got sent. Holy shit!
Okay.
Wow.
Okay, everybody, little change of plans. As we mentioned, that interview just came out, and we decided as a panel to break off and go ahead and listen to that interview, because the next part on the podcast just happens to be the part of Bobby talking about the things that unfolded. And so we think the best thing to do before we make comments about it, we should go and listen to all of the available information. And it's a bombshell. Let's just put it that way. Do you guys have any comments just like about what this could mean? Just give me a 2-minute how excited you are before I let you guys go, as your wrap-up comments or anything else about it that you want to talk about?
I've got a long, busy day ahead of me now. I have got to now listen to this interview, and I have to then get refocused back into Johnny. So tapping out, guys. It's been great.
Well, Jeff, I two things. First is I think that even in the short amount of time that we got to look at this episode, there was just more evidence to debunk, especially with regard to the distribution of bones from the different parts of the body ending up all in the same place. The jackhammering of the concrete, just a total lack of evidence, and that's really the story about the evidence. Is not the propensity of it; it's the lack of it. It's not there's not stuff where there should be stuff. With regard to the Bobby Dassey interview, I'm excited to watch it too. It seems to me that the police had some type of leverage over Bobby in order to get him to do the things that he did on the stand, to say the things that he did. And it would be interesting if we were to find out what that leverage was. So we know from the jail calls that Barb said that they really gave him a tough interview. We'll see that. And I strongly suspect that what we're going to see, and I hope it's unedited, but I tend to doubt it. I believe that they have redacted quite a bit of information.
Yeah, I just wanted to say this was an incredible episode so far, and we've covered a hell of a lot, and it's great that the panel is able to give their own opinions to what occurred with the cremains and also the blood in the RAV. And it goes to show that even though it's 2022, there's still a lot of information that we don't know about. The mere fact that Mystic Jinx was able to get this interview where no one else has had any success at all is incredible. And I think we should all definitely listen to it, because upcoming next is all about Scott Tadich and Bobby Dassey. So that'll be a very interesting interview to listen, and kudos to Mystic Jinx for obtaining that document.
but I'm pretty excited to go listen to see this. I hope there's something there that gives us some amount of clarity. That's all I'm really ever looking for. So thanks everybody for a condensed version of an episode, but we'll be back to talk next week about these new recordings and these new things and how they fit into what we know now. So thanks again, everybody. This has been Discussing a Murder.